plenty of treasures. Arr!
Has he had another knock on the head that we don't know about?
Almost certainly.
The Grand Tour presents Simmonds. Stream now on Prime Video.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, very good morning. It is 3 minutes past 11 on LBC. You're listening to Iain Dale. If you didn't watch us on election night, and I say watch because the whole thing was streamed live, you can do so. If you've got an 8-hour flight ahead of you, and I know somebody is doing this as we speak, you can watch it back on YouTube. Just go to the LBC YouTube channel. More than 500,000 people have watched it so far. That's not including Facebook and Twitter. And we are streaming this hour live as well. So if you'd like to watch us as well as listen, you can do so on the LBC website at lbc.co.uk, the YouTube channel, Facebook page or Twitter feed. The reason that we are streaming it is because we've got 4 newly elected MPs with us in the studio. Now, we did this, I remember, in 2015 when I was on Drive, and we invited then Tanya Mathias from the Conservatives, Stephen Kinnock from Labour, James Cleverly from the Conservatives, and another Labour MP, Tulip Siddiq. And I was thinking about, well, what's happened to them? Because we like to think of this as a bit of a rising stars panel. So we're going to look and see what the progress is of these 4 MPs in a few years' time. So James Cleverly is now chairman of the Conservative Party. Stephen Kinnock, he was on the front bench, of course, but resigned under Jeremy Corbyn. Tanya Mathias, she lost her seat at the 2017 election. And Tulip Siddiq, she's created quite a high profile for herself on the Labour benches. So joining me in the studio, we have James Murray, Labour and Cooperative MP for Ealing North, former Deputy Mayor of London for Housing. He succeeded Stephen Pound. I'm not sure, have you got the same sense of humour, James? That's what we all want to know.
I spent a lot of time with Steve in the last few weeks.
It rubbed off.
Had quite a lot of jokes from him, and many of them I can't repeat live on air.
We have David Simmonds, Conservative MP for Ruislip, Northwood and Pinner, and Deputy... Is that the right description of the constituency? I was saying it was Ruislip and South Norwood earlier.
It's Ruislip, Northwood and Pinner.
Oh, well, there we go. I was outdated. And Deputy Chairman of the Local Government Association, welcome to you. Daisy Cooper is the new Liberal Democrat MP for St Albans, which that was a result that kind of passed me by on the night. I only noticed that you'd won yesterday, Daisy. You'd stood there before, and I think whenever you stood in a seat before, you know what losing is like, and then you have the euphoria of winning, a bit of a contrast.
That's right. I think our little team is still flying high at the moment, but I'm in no doubt that I'll have a bit of a crash landing when we start in Parliament on Monday.
And Elliot Colburn is Conservative MP for Coshalton and Wallington. He defeated Tom Brake, the Liberal Democrat, which I think most people thought was quite a surprise. Now, you're a local boy. You come from the area.
Yeah, that's right.
Did you expect to win?
You don't ever want to let yourself dare to dream, I think. I'd fought the seat 4 times in either as a capacity as a candidate or as an activist, so we didn't, I think, want to dare to dream that it was possible, but we're absolutely over the moon that we've finally managed to do it.
Well, they're going to be taking your calls a little bit later in the hour, so if you have any questions for them, 0345 6060 973. We can kind of carry on the discussion from the last hour in a way. What lessons should we learn from the result of this general election? Well, let's put that question to all of you. David Simmonds, what lesson do you learn from this election?
Well, it's clear the country wants a government with a majority that can get things done. The frustration that voters were expressing on the doorstep, whichever side they were, of the Brexit referendum result, was that nothing seemed to be happening. It was like there was a logjam in Parliament. And I heard that message loud and clear, not just in my own constituency, but in the other ones where I went to help.
Elliot?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think for London in particular, the Conservatives have got a lot of learning and growing to do. It wasn't the best place in the country for us. So we have got a challenge before the mayoral elections next year. So I think the Conservative Party needs to take that momentum that we've now got from the amazing result that we've had, but also specifically look at London, because we've only got a few months before the next election that we'll all be talking about. So I think the party now needs to look at the capital and see what we can do before next May's election.
It's interesting because I was talking to Ian Duncan-Smith and David Davis earlier, and they were talking about what needs to be done to make sure those Labour voters in the north that came to the Conservatives for the first time, that they don't go back to Labour next time. You think it's London that needs a bit of concentration?
Well, I think it's both. I totally agree with both of them. I think we need to now demonstrate as a party that we've earned their trust and they were right to put their trust in us, and that I think is the real challenge going forward, is that we need to reach out to those people that voted for us for the first time, or may even only voted for us this once, and may be considering going back if they hope that the Labour Party turns into something that they recognise more in a couple of years' time. So we have got a real challenge, I think, as a party to repay that trust in those people who voted for us in the north of England.
OK, Daisy Cooper, obviously the Liberal Democrats had a fairly disastrous night. You were one of the few bright spots in it. What lessons should your party learn?
Well, I think one of the lessons for the entire country is that, for me, this was an election about tactical voting. The Brexit Party pulled out of a number of seats, giving the Conservatives a free run. And other parties, some parties managed to work together and others didn't. And I think it's still shameful that in 2019, voters are still having to game the system in order to get the least worst option when looking to how they want to vote. And I think right across the country, the choice between Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn was a really dismal choice for a lot of people. And I hope that in the years to come, we get better leadership from all of the parties that people can really believe in. And I think the choice between Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn was a really dismal choice for many people in the country, even for those who voted for them.
What about the choice of Jo Swinson? Because, I mean, she was one of the top three leaders at the beginning of the campaign. I got Liberal Democrat leaflets through my door telling me that she was going to be Prime Minister. Why didn't people react to her well?
Well, we had a really successful year. You know, we did really well in the European Parliament elections, electing 16 MEPs, rising to around sort of 22% in the national polls. And that was in an election where every vote mattered. And here we are a few months on in a first-past-the-post general election where Liberal Democrats always get squeezed.
But every vote matters in a general election.
Well, you can't always vote for the party that you want to vote for. We know that this was an election about tactical voting, and we've seen that through the rise of tactical voting sites, through the choice of Nigel Farage to give Boris Johnson a free run. It was very, very tricky. But what I would say about Jo in particular is that I've been knocking on doors for the Lib Dems for 11 years, and there are always two questions that we used to get. One, who is your leader? And secondly, what do you stand for? And what I can definitely say about Jo in the last 6 months, everybody knew who she was. Her name and face recognition was higher than probably any other Lib Dem leader at this point in time. And she ran an absolutely honest campaign about what we believed in and the fact that we wanted to be we were the leading voice of the Remain movement.
Was it a mistake to promise to revoke Article 50?
Yeah, good question. I think we need to have a wash up to look at that. I think having made the decision that Jo was going to pitch to become the Prime Minister of the country, I don't think we could have pitched for anything other than revoking Article 50. Otherwise, we would have ended up in the situation that the Labour Party did, where we'd be pretending that we wanted to put Theresa May's deal or Boris Johnson's deal or our own deal up for a referendum, and that wouldn't have made sense. But there is a question now that we need to reflect on, which is, had we have positioned ourselves instead as a break on one or other of the two big parties, then we might have continued our push for people's votes.
James, what lesson should the Labour Party learn from this? I wish we got the rest of the hour to talk to you about this one issue, because that actually seems to have dominated the conversations since Friday, rather than what Boris Johnson should do. Where do you stand on this?
I think everyone in the party needs to reflect on what happened. And I was with members of my constituency party last night, and we were all talking it through, just having very honest conversations about what happened. Recognising that in Ealing North and in many seats in London we did very well, but that we clearly didn't do well across the country, and we need to understand what happened.
But you didn't even do well in London. You won one seat.
But it's not just a conversation, though, that we can have, in London. It's a conversation we need to have with the whole country and try to understand what happened by talking to people and to party members right across the country.
Do you even need to have that conversation? Isn't it quite clear what happened? I mean, we heard Ed Miliband said after the 2015 election, well, we need to have a conversation with the country to find out what happened. But it is very, very clear. You had a leader that people thought was sympathetic to extremists. You had a manifesto that had so much in it that people didn't think that it cohered and that it could be funded. And the Brexit position was just idiotic.
I think there's a lot of different theories about what happened, and I think we need to have honest reflection. I don't think anyone who comes on a show today and says, I know exactly what the answer was, I know exactly what happened in different parts of the country, is being honest, because I think we need to have that conversation and reflect on what happened.
But you're going to need a new leader very soon. Apparently, the new leader will be elected in the first couple of months of next year. There isn't a lot of time to have that conversation. Or is that what the leadership contest will be based around?
Well, I suppose that's what the leadership contest will become, to an extent, is having that conversation. And I think that's why, in a way, not rushing to make conclusions about exactly what happened or what we do next is the right thing to do, and use that leadership contest and the run-up to it to have that conversation and to really reflect on and think about what happened.
Now, John McDonnell has said this morning the next Labour leader should be a woman and not a London MP, so that rules you out. Who should be the next leader in your view?
I think it's too soon to get into that.
Oh, come on.
It is too soon.
You must have an instinct as to who you'd
It's the first
like.
weekend. It's too soon for me to get into that.
I mean, which part of the party would you describe yourself as being
Well, I'm on
from?
the left of the party, but it's, as I say, it's too soon to get into
Corbyn
that.
left or Miliband left?
Well, I voted for both Corbyn and Miliband, so I've supported both, and I worked for Sadiq. So, I'm from the left of the party. I did support Jeremy. I thought that what the direction he took the party made us more radical. We had a better set of policies.
Certainly did that.
But I think that we got to reflect on all the decisions that we've all taken.
Did you support him
over the
second time round?
Yeah, I did.
You did.
We got to think about the decisions we took.
Okay. Before we go to the calls, let's just quickly go around the table about. People think it's very odd that anybody wants to go into politics, national politics nowadays, partly because of all of the abuse that MPs get. What motivated you all to stand for Parliament? Because people are always suspicious about politicians' motives for wanting national office. Elliot, let's start with you.
I think it was, I got bored of sort of moaning about things and not doing anything about them. And for me, it was very much a local factor. The constituency I represent is the one I was born and raised in and have never moved away from. So I think I'm going to be focusing a lot on my constituency rather than my parliamentary career over the next 5 years, because it was very much driven, I think, by the fact that I don't think that my constituency was getting the attention that it needed in terms of its healthcare, its transport infrastructure and the local environment. So that's really what motivated me. It was very much, I think, local rather than national.
And how much did you learn from your predecessor, Tom Bray? Because, of course, he won the seat in 1997.
Yeah.
And I suspect was a sort of typical Liberal Democrat MP in being sort of seen as a very good constituency MP.
Yeah, and look, I have the greatest respect for Tom Bray, and I pay tribute to his 22 years of service to the constituency. And I said that in my acceptance speech. No one can hold on to a seat that long unless they do a good job, because if you survive the good times and the bad, like 2015, for example, when the Liberal Democrats dropped to only 8 seats, he was one of the few that held on. And I think that was testament to the work that he did. So I would be looking to carry on that legacy of being a very good constituency MP and putting the local first rather than worrying too much about the national. And that is what I intend to focus on.
And I'm going to ask you all this question, so the other three will have a bit more time to prepare for this one than you. What's your ambition in politics? What job would you really like?
If I had to have one, I would say that my background in the NHS, obviously the health department would be a really interesting one. I think everyone would like the Foreign Office, of course, who wouldn't? But we're talking, I think, a long time in the future. I'm one of the youngest that's just been elected. So
how old are you?
27. So I think I've got a couple of years of getting my feet under the table before I even think about that first.
And you've had a bit of trolling, I hear, on social media because at the count you kissed your partner, your male partner. I know, how terrible. What do you make of the abuse that you've had?
Unfortunately, as you were just talking about the abuse, it is something that I think we all now come to expect. And I think, particularly for women and LGBT candidates and BME candidates, they do get it, I think, slightly worse. And I didn't even know that photo was taken. It was put up on social media. I thought it was quite nice. But
I have to say, it's quite a smacker.
Yeah, I won't describe what my friend called it, but no, I mean, just like any other couple, we obviously, Jed's incredibly proud of me, and I couldn't be luckier for having him on my team, and wanted to show my appreciation for all the help he gave me throughout the campaign. You
certainly did that. Right, I'm going to ask. we'll have a break so the rest of you can prepare your answers for this one. It's 11:16.
This is LBC.
For the independent bookseller who found you that first edition.
For the baker who brings the smell of freshly baked bread to your door.
And for the barista who never needs to ask your name.
We've all got a part to play.
Every little tap keeps your high street alive.
And helps your communities thrive.
So if you love where you live, shop small.
Shop small with American Express. And when you spend £10 or more, we'll credit you with £5 back. Search Shop Small. Offer available on selected cards. Enrolment required. Available in-store. Participating merchants only. Once per location up to £50.
This is the sound of a market with fixed prices and no haggling. Just like a traditional bookie, all setting the same odds. Now, the Betfair Exchange is different because you're betting against fellow bettors. So if you're unhappy with the odds on offer, just set your own and see who takes you on. Why not give it a go? The Betfair Exchange.
Exchange Basic Package customers pay 2% commission. Other charges may apply. 18 plus. BeGambleAware.org.
Business like a boss with a new mobile plan from 3. All the usual stuff you could get from a phone contract like unlimited data, plus 6 months of exclusive benefits from our partners. Spend less time accounting and more time businessing with FreshBooks. Build a website designed to work perfectly on a mobile with Wix. Get a receptionist that's not your nan at WeWork. And nothing says I've got this like a business card from Moo. Get the mobile plan that actually helps your business, because 3 means business. Search 3.co.uk/business for further details.
Pick up your Christmas presents and your pudding all at the same time. Order your presents online at John Lewis and Partners by 8 p.m. and collect them from 2 p.m. the next day from Waitrose and Partners. Click and Collect is free on orders over £30 and can be collected right up until Christmas Eve. Exclusions apply. See in store or online for details.
This is someone making an online booking at Ford.co.uk using the words Ford20 so they can service their Ford for £20 less. And this is someone who didn't get their Ford serviced. You see, at Ford, we use Ford genuine parts and Ford-trained technicians. Plus, if you quote Ford20 when you book with us online, you can receive £20 off. Book now at Ford.co.uk or visit your local participating dealer. Ford Service. No one knows your Ford better.
Retail customers only. At participating Ford dealers. Cannot be used with other promotions. T's and C's apply. Search Ford Service for more information.
Iain Dale on LBC.
19 minutes past 11 is the time. Let me remind you, you can watch us on the LBC website at lbc.co.uk, Facebook page or Twitter feed and YouTube channel. Right, Elliot has told us what motivated him to get into politics and told us a couple of good anecdotes there. Let's go to David. Same question to you, David Simmonds.
I've been an elected politician for 21 years. One of the things I like about local government is the fact that you can do things that your residents, that your voters can see. You can bring about positive change that's recognised. So what I'd like to be part of in Parliament is bringing about changes in national policy that when we go out canvassing as politicians, talk to people on the doorsteps, they can say, I can recognise a positive change in my community as a result of something that you've done in Westminster. And I hope that begins to break down some of the barriers that we see. You know, a lot of things talked about in the election. And I recognise we're all here from London and the South East, but I grew up in South Wales. The world looks very different from Caerphilly, from how it appears in Kensington or Islington.
We had a caller from Caerphilly an hour ago. I think you're right. And what do you think your experience as a councillor can inform you in your job as an MP? Because there are comparatively few councillors who ever get into Westminster, aren't there?
Well, all councillors know that you have to live within your means when you're making policy decisions, that the budget and what you're seeking in terms of an outcome need to be hand in hand. We've all got experience of having to work cross-party. I spent 8 years in a coalition-type arrangement, Liberal Democrats in our case, working constructively with the Labour opposition. I think some of the bitterness that we've seen in Parliament between members on different sides needs to be left behind so that we can all work together constructively in the national interest. And there will be disagreements. We understand that's going to be the case. There's probably going to be a pretty difficult vote on Brexit coming up this Thursday. But we do all recognise that the country needs to move on now. And I think the experience of having been through those difficult debates and then coming out the other side saying, we've made a decision, we're going to live with that decision, we're going to see it through, and we're going to recognise the positive difference that it makes, is going to be really useful in being part of that team.
And are you going to resign as a councillor?
I'm going to carry on because I'm a councillor in my constituency for the time being. We're due to have local elections before too long. The conversation about exactly when that happens is one that I'll have in due course with my association and with my colleagues on the council. But we're immensely proud of what we've achieved together.
You can't carry on. I mean, the elections are in May, aren't they? So you'll continue till then, but you wouldn't think about standing
The next London elections are 2022. There are councillors who carry on.
2022?
There are councillors who carry on as MPs. But
that'd be quite something to continue as a councillor for that long, surely.
Well, the key thing is that the constituents get the service that they need. And that's something, because I'm completely new to parliamentary politics, I'm going to have to work out. But we've got a fantastic local team. I'm very confident we're going to carry on working together on.
What's your ambition in politics?
Well, my ambition is to see those differences, that when I walk down the road, residents can say something is different in our community, in our country, as a result of the decisions that I've been a part of. It's not about holding particular offices. I've got a lot of experience around education, children's social care and local government, and there are things I'd like to do in each of those areas. But that may be about asking the right questions of ministers. It may be about seeking ministerial office. But at the moment, it's very much focused on how can I make that positive change.
So, Secretary of State for Education or local government, that's I'm reading between the lines there. That's what you'd quite like to do. Yeah, okay. Daisy, what motivated you to get involved in politics in the first place?
Well, I grew up in the 80s and 90s under Margaret Thatcher, and I, as a
lucky girl.
Yeah, quite. As a child, I remember lots of colourful language being used about that government, and so I grew up thinking that the Tories were the bad guys, and that everyone else was probably all right. And then it was only in my late 20s, when around sort of 2007, 2008, the Labour Party were on their sort of way out, and I remember. I think it was a Sunday morning. I was sitting on the sofa, and there was a Labour minister giving an interview on TV. And started talking about how the Labour Party was going to tackle homegrown terrorism, and Stop and Search had got out of control, and they were starting to sort of target groups based on their ethnicity rather than on any actual evidence. And I guess all of my, having done 2 law degrees, this really smacked of injustice to me on a basic sort of principle of civil liberties. And I was so appalled at what I heard, so appalled at what the Labour Party was doing in terms of this authoritarian, top-down, stop-and-search approach, that I decided that, well, first of all, I was worried about the future of the country. I thought, where do we end up? And here we are, 11 years on. And secondly, I looked at that Labour minister and I thought I can probably do a better job than her. So decided to get involved and join the Lib Dems.
Is this Jackie Smith we're talking about?
Do you know, I can't remember whether it was Hazel Blears or Jackie Smith. I can't remember who it was, but I'd have to go back and check.
I'll be mentioning this on the For the Many podcast next week.
Okay.
And where do you see yourself going? I mean, it's always difficult to say to a Lib Dem, well, what job would you like to do? Because, okay, there was the coalition government, but it's unlikely, I think we can all agree, there'll be a Lib Dem government. But, I mean, if you're there are only 11 Liberal Democrat MPs, you're going to have to shadow a government department, I imagine. What representations are you going to make?
Yeah, well, we're having these conversations in our group in the next couple of days. I mean, I guess the 2 or 3 areas that I would really love, either climate, that's number one, because we know we've got 10 years left to stop irreversible damage to the planet, and we've got to take tough action in year 1, year 2, year 3. Possibly welfare, I mean, St Albans is known as a sort of leafy, well-off part of the country, but, we've got thousands of people using food banks, we've got rising homelessness, and I think that, DWP has got a lot to answer for, or possibly DCMS, because, we're looking at the influence of, Russian interference in our elections and the use of online campaigning, and there's a big challenge there.
Well, you might get a couple of those, I think, given that there's 20-odd government departments. Obviously, there's going to be a leadership contest for the Lib Dems. You are even tipped as a new MP to run for leader in one of the papers this morning. Any truth in that?
Well, it's day 3, right? It's day 3 as an MP for me. I've got a list of 100 organisations I want to contact in my first 100 days. I've got a massive collection to organise for our local food bank in St Albans in the next couple of weeks. I've got an office to set up. Let's see where we are in a few weeks' time. But I'm not going to rule anything out at this stage.
Well, that's interesting in itself, because I would have thought as a new MP you would say, no, it's too early.
Well, quite frankly, I've worked in campaigns for a long time. We've got 11 MPs in Parliament, but I'm also hoping to join the More United MP network, which is a cross-party network of 60 MPs. I've got big ambitions about what we can achieve in Parliament as a small team in the Lib Dems, but I've also got ambitions about the kind of country that I want to be living in. I want Britain to be an open, internationalist, environmentalist country that creates a safety net for people and gives people power over their own lives. I think we are a long way from that under this Conservative government, and I don't think the Labour government is going to step up to the plate. So I've got big ambitions for the kind of country that I want to live in, and I have to sort of see, as an MP on day 3, the best place to start for that is in St Albans. Okay. But let's see where we are in a few weeks' time.
James Murray from the Labour Party. What you've been involved in politics for some time, held a variety of positions. What got you interested in politics in the first place?
So I've been a councillor before, and I've worked for Sadiq as his Deputy Mayor for Housing, and what really drove me to get into those roles was firstly making a difference in my local area, and then making a difference in the borough that I was an executive member within, and then across London working for Sadiq. I think then when Steve Pound said he was stepping down from Ely North, it's where I grew up, I thought, I'm really proud of what I've done on a council and working for Sadiq, but I can see the limits of it when you've got a government who isn't supportive of what we want to do. And when you've got a government who is not supporting, what we want to do in terms of housing, in terms of, making the country fairer. I realised that what I wanted to do is be part of that national fight as well, standing up for what I believe in. So what I feel I bring is the experience that I've had working on a council and working in City Hall. But I've realised that unless you really change things nationally, you can't ultimately achieve everything that we want to.
And what's your ambition?
Right now, to be the best possible MP for Ely North. And I mean that very honestly.
And in the future?
We'll see what happens.
I mean, you've been a deputy mayor, so presumably you would want to serve on the front bench. I mean, what would be your ideal job on the front bench?
Let's see what happens. It's not for me to decide. It's for the leader, whoever that is, to decide. And right now, I honestly mean this. I'm excited about getting into my role as MP for Ely North.
You've been Deputy Mayor of London for housing. That's going to be, to my mind, one of the biggest issues of the next 5 years.
Yeah, and whatever way I can contribute towards the Labour Party policy in terms of housing, I will contribute, whether that's backbench or any other role. But I want to make sure that we have the best possible housing policy for Ely North, for London, for the country.
Three of you are kind of local candidates, aren't you? Which is, I don't know where you're from, Daisy. You're not from...
I'm a Suffolk girl, born and
Suffolk
bred.
girl.
But,
Excellent.
Yeah, I've lived in St Albans for 3 years and knew it very well before then because I had family that lived there.
So it is interesting that people imagine nowadays that everybody is parachuted in, as the phrase goes, but not in all of your cases. Just before we go to the news and come to calls, what do you think it brings for someone to be a local candidate? They've grown up in the local communities, because there'll be a lot of MPs who aren't, who have moved into the area. Maybe not even. I remember the first seat I applied for, nearly got, was Monmouth in Wales, and I'd never even been to Wales before. So thank goodness I didn't get it. But I mean, Elliot, you've obviously made a lot of your local background.
Yeah, I think it does add a benefit. I don't think it's the most important thing in the world, but I think it does have the added benefit of knowing that because you walk on the same streets, shop in the same shops and use the same services, that you are acutely aware of the problems that are facing your community. And so when someone brings up an issue with you, you're not thinking, okay, I need to have a look at that street, or I'm not quite sure where that person lives. You just know it, and you know what needs to be done, so you can sort of get to work straight away. But I do think we are finding now that more and more people are attracted to local members of parliament, and I've found, I think, in selections across the country, if you look at who've been selected as candidates, local candidates do really well, and they often beat out big names. Iain, yourself, obviously in North Norfolk, that happened for you, but I think localism is taking over a lot of these selections.
James, it also can be a disadvantage to be a local candidate in party selections, because inevitably, particularly if you've been a local councillor, and David, I don't know sort of how popular you are as a local councillor in your association. Well, clearly very popular because you won the selection, but sometimes people know all of your weaknesses and you have enemies as a local candidate, don't you?
I guess that might be the case. I mean, from my point of view, I was Deputy Mayor of Housing for London, so I had a London-wide remit. That meant I did some work in Ealing, as elsewhere across the capital. But having that local connection, having grown up there, and just knowing it, and actually just, I suppose from my point of view, it's just really having that personal drive to want to represent the area where you grew up. There's something really special about that, and that's what, for me, kind of drove me to stand for it and why I wanted to do it, and I think what gives me a really good connection with the area.
Well, David, we've already got some constituency casework for you from one of your constituents, Chandan Kumar. He says, this is a message for David. I'm a resident in Ickenham and would like to ask the councillor rather than MP, what steps he plans to take to stop all works in HS2 in the Ickenham area until the final decision has been made on this massive waste of taxpayers' money. Well, he's nailing his colours to the mast.
Well, that's very much a hot local issue, and I think I'm probably slightly at variance with my party on this, in that I think the environmental damage that we're seeing in West London from the HS2 project is absolutely enormous. As a local authority, we have limited powers for something that's been granted through Acts of Parliament, the ability to get on with the work that it's doing at the moment. But there is a bigger question now. I think the results of the election showed some of the divisions in our country, and I'd like to see massive investment in things like rail infrastructure, transport infrastructure in the Midlands and the north of England, help rebalance the economy. And it's clear that voters are crying out for that sort of approach. London, we need to make sure that we ensure things like effective transport links, public transport, particularly if we're going to address some of the climate challenges that we face. But other parts of the country feel very much left behind. And as a new Conservative government with massive representation across the country, we need to make sure that we're not leaving places behind.
Daisy, I have to inform you, you've committed news this morning. Ryan Saby, political correspondent of The Sun. New Lib Dem MP Daisy Cooper not ruling out a run for party leader, she tells Iain Dale on LBC. You'll be in the papers tomorrow. It's 11:32. Let's get the latest news headlines from Philip Chrysikos.
Jeremy Corbyn admits Labour's general election results was, in his words, a body blow for everyone who needs real change in our country, adding he takes his responsibility for it. But Jeremy Corbyn says there still needs to be a process of reflection before he resigns as party leader. Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Michael Gove, says the government will absolutely not grant permission for a second Scottish independence referendum. Separately, Boris Johnson is expected to make his £34 billion a year NHS spending pledge law in the Queen's speech this Thursday. Recovery teams insist they will continue searching for 2 bodies missing following a volcanic eruption in New Zealand last Monday. Earlier, authorities said 8 workers were deployed for more than an hour in their latest search operation. LBC weather: sun and showers in the west, wintry in the north, sunshine in the south and the east, a high of 9 degrees.
This is LBC.
I'll give you 20p for it. 50p? £5.
Isn't it great when you get more for something than you expected? Scrap or part exchange with Vauxhall and we'll give you a guaranteed £4,000 towards a new Crossland-X or Grandland-X with 4.9% APR representative. Search Vauxhall Trade It. T's and C's and restrictions apply. Trade-in car must be registered in your name for at least 90 days. Available on conditional sale and personal contract purchase only. Subject to status 18+. Vauxhall Finance. Other deposit contributions may be available if you don't have a trade-in vehicle.
I'm Jose Mourinho. I know a thing or two about being special. Getting a road named after you in your hometown? Special. Winning the daily jackpot on Paddy Power Games? Not special.
Understood, Jose. Yes, someone wins an average £40,000 jackpot every single day. So if you win, don't think you're special. Daily Jackpots by Paddy Power Games. Jackpots must be awarded by 11 p.m. and vary from day to day. Jackpot is shared with other operators. Available on selected games. T's and C's at paddypower.com. 18+. BeGambleAware.org.
We are working with partners to help
Londoners breathe cleaner air.
That's why we've installed
over 200 electric rapid charge points.
Some exclusively for taxis.
And others for rapid charging cars and vans.
Now that's a breath of fresh air.
For everyone.
Search TfL improvements.
To the Mayor of London
and TfL.
Every journey matters.
Ah, Christmas. A time for treating yourself to the very best. And this Saturday, it's Arsenal v Man City. Can Freddie turn the tables on the champions this weekend?
This one's a beauty!
Buy the Premier League channel and get another Sky Sports channel completely free. Now just £18 a month. Simply search Buy Sky Sports. Sky Sports Premier League plus additional sports channel £18 extra a month for 18 months. Thereafter, standard price applies. Currently £22 a month. 31 days notice to cancel. Requires Sky TV. Further terms apply. Offer ends 2nd January.
You never know where life will take you, which is why the new BMW 3 Series Touring is perfect if you're all packed up for, or escaping to. It has extensive storage and an automatic tailgate, handy if your hands are full. And it even has an optional intelligent voice assistant to help you at every turn. The new BMW 3 Series Touring. Book your 24-hour test drive today. Test drive subject to status and availability. Participating retailers only.
At Lidl, we're big on all you want for Christmas. And we've just won Quality Food Awards Christmas Retailer of the Year. We're big on award-winning sparkle and bronze turkeys getting gold. Big on our show-stopping afters coming first. Big on a Christmas you can believe in. Now that's big on award-winning quality and always Lidl on price. Subject to availability, selected stores excludes an eye.
This is LBC with Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973.
It's 11:35 on LBC. We are in the company of 4 newly elected MPs. Elliot Colburn, the Conservative MP for Carshalton and Wallington. Daisy Cooper, Liberal Democrat MP for St Albans. David Simmonds, Conservative MP for Ruislip, Northwood and Pinner. And James Murray, Labour and Cooperative MP for Ealing North. It's time to go to your calls. 0345 6060 973. Mark is in Margate. Hello, Mark.
Hello.
Hi, what would you like to ask?
I'm sick and tired of MPs having no life experience. A lot of them seem to be career politicians these days. I'd like to know what experience with business or other jobs, other than political appointments, your 4 MPs have had.
It's a really good question, isn't it? Because a lot of complaints have been made in the past about the sort of spadocracy, people who've gone into Parliament having immediately gone into the House of Commons as a researcher, then a special advisor, and then becoming MPs with no life experience. James Murray, what's been your non-political background?
Yeah, so I worked in a consultancy briefly when I left university, but I have worked in politics quite a long time. But if you look at my job,
so you're exactly who Mark's talking about.
Well, if I can just, I think if you look at having worked as a councillor, as a cabinet member, and then deputy mayor of housing for London, it's not just being an advisor; it's actually getting stuff done. And I think that's what makes my experience different. In I know how to put the policies that I've thought about into practice, and that's the experience it's given me. So yeah, I've spent time on the front line, but it has been on the front line. It's been getting stuff done rather than just being an advisor.
Daisy.
I've worked since my teens, so my first job was apple picking in a Suffolk field in the rain and the cold. Then I worked on a farm during my GCSEs, vaccinating pigs and building sheds and weeding farms, that kind of thing. At university, I worked in a nightclub, so most night shifts till 4 a.m, and I used to work in a William Hill call centre, doing the accumulators in my head, which I can't do anymore. So I've worked my entire life through that time. And then after university, I went into the sort of non-profit sector. So as I went through my career, I have run non-profit organisations, been responsible for all the sort of, the finance of it, as well as the campaigning side as well. I've worked with victims of press abuse and press intrusion, and provided that sort of pastoral service as well as professional advice. So I've always worked from a very young age. I hope I've got a strong work ethic. I've never worked in business, but in St Albans, I work very closely with something called the Save St Albans Pubs campaign, and these are small pubs, small businesses that are absolutely struggling under the weight of their business rates.
I think if you become leader, we all want to hear more about your nightclub experience. Elliot.
Obviously I've had my fair share of experience working in Parliament, but I have also always worked. So started as a paperboy at the age of 11, and at university, did my fair share of stints behind the bar. But my first job after leaving uni was working with vulnerable customers who'd fallen into debt. So I worked with a debt collection company to ensure that their collection procedures met new FCA guidelines and that vulnerable people got the support they needed. But I've also had a background working in the health service. So I worked at the NHS in South West London doing public affairs, and one of my main concerns was making sure that our hospitals were ready for winter. So we ran things such as get your flu jab, stay well in winter, trying to encourage people to make better use of the health service and choose smarter, so using extended GP access, using pharmacists, rather than going to A&E for absolutely everything. And we had quite a good success rate in the last few years in South West London.
Okay, David Simmonds.
Well, I started in telesales when I was a student, but when I qualified at university, I became a chartered financial advisor, so I worked for a number of the big high street banks, strictly non-bailed out variety.
I wanted to boo and hiss then, I don't know why. But
strictly of the non-bailed out variety. And then I worked for myself in a similar way, and for some other blue chip organisations at the same time as I was developing my career in local government. So I've been a councillor for a long time as well. But like Elliot, very much seen the focus and the benefit really. What I learnt during my business career is how the decisions that I was making, both with individual clients and with local businesses, affected what was going on in our local economy, and I hope that will allow me to ask more informed questions in Parliament. But enormously, the learning from being in politics over that time about how to get things done in a political system, which is very different from what I learned about in the working world, will be valuable too.
Okay, Mark, quick reaction from you?
Yeah, very interesting. It seems like only one person had any real job, but yeah.
Which one?
The last speaker.
Okay.
But no, apart from a splattering of student jobs, it seems most people have gone into unpaid work or political appointments. But I'm not so sure about the Deputy London Housing Minister. Is that right? Or
Deputy Mayor of London for Housing. Yeah.
Deputy Mayor of London for Housing. I'm not sure how successful he was in that. I don't think they've got a great record on housing.
Well, I've got to let him come back on that. How successful were you, James?
We smashed our records every year that I was in that role.
It's not what Boris Johnson says. He reckons that Sadiq Khan hasn't built many houses at all.
Well, funny that Boris Johnson might have something negative to say about Sadiq Khan, but we beat the record, the targets that we set with the government every year. But as I said in my earlier question, I realise there are limits for what we can do at City Hall if you've got a government who isn't supportive, and that's why I've stood for Parliament.
Right, let's move on to a really difficult question from Kevin, who's in Dundee. Hello, Kevin.
Morning, guys.
Morning.
Just want to first say congratulations to all your panel on being elected. You've got a tremendous opportunity and great responsibility, changing millions of people's lives, and I just hope you use those powers well.
Wise words, Kevin.
My question is quite simply, and they're kind of ancillary, is basically, so what's going to happen about Scotland? Obviously, you can't just be saying no. If you look back at history, the 1890s and the early 20th century, you know that it's a similar debate that was had about the Ireland home rule referendum and what happened there. And then again, Northern Ireland, you know, there's tremendous opportunity, and now it's been essentially going to be still in the EU. There's going to be a border in the Irish Sea. Despite what Bojo says, I wouldn't trust the word he says. If you knocked on my door and told me it was day, I'd be checking out the window to make sure it wasn't night. There is going to be, you know, customs declarations on stuff going from Northern Ireland to the UK. And, you know, I've skinned in the game. I have 2 kids who are Irish. So,
okay.
You know.
Right, let's get an answer to that. So, Daisy Cooper, it is very difficult, isn't it, particularly for the government when they've only got 6 MPs in Scotland. Should they accede to Nicola Sturgeon's demands for another referendum?
You know, I really don't think so. And I think that in Scotland, the vast majority of Remainers know that independence is not a lifeboat to the EU. It really isn't. You know, if Scotland wanted to join the EU independently, it needs to apply as a new country. In order to do that, it can't have a deficit more than 3%. It's currently running at 7%. There's no lender of last resort. You know, and even if Scotland did get independence and applied, there's no guarantee it would be accepted, because obviously Spain may, you know, which is concerned about its own sort of separatist movement, Spain may veto that application. So I think we need to see some honesty about what would happen if Scotland did become independent and its implications, because it isn't a lifeboat to the EU, and I'd much rather Scotland stayed in the United Kingdom.
I'm going to ask you all for short answers on this, because then we can get some more questions in before the end. David?
I agree with Daisy.
Well, that's admirably short. You will be invited back with that short answer. Elliot?
I agree with Daisy.
James?
I want Scotland to stay part of the UK, but actually it's not for me as a London MP to start theorising about what's going on in Scotland and about exactly what the answer is there. I think part of what we learned and what we talked about earlier is about listening to people around the country, and that includes Scotland.
But do you not think that there is a mandate now for another referendum, and that the SNP stood on that platform in the last Scottish Parliament elections and indeed in this general election, and they wiped the board?
But we'll see how that plays out. But as I said, it's not for me, I think, as a London MP to start theorising.
You're a national politician now. You do need to surely have a view on this.
Yeah, and as I said, my view is I want Scotland to stay part of the UK.
All right. Just read this one out. Nat says, my son has completed a degree in politics and international relations. He's done lots of jobs, including internships, lived in Chile teaching for a year, lived in Spain for a year, passed out as an officer from Sandhurst, and is also working in banking. He wants to be a politician, but doesn't feel like he has enough life experience. I'd say that's quite a bit, actually. It measures up to everybody around this table, so I'd say go for it. It's 11:45.
Coming up at 12 on LBC, Majid Nawaz.
Standing in Tony Blair's former seat, Boris Johnson promised to serve the people. So will he govern as a one-nation Tory, and does Boris Johnson have a vision for the country?
Majid Nawaz on LBC.
At Lidl, we're big on all you want for Christmas. And we've just won Quality Food Awards Christmas Retailer of the Year. We're big on award-winning sparkle and bronze turkeys getting gold. Big on our show-stopping afters coming first. Big on a Christmas you can believe in. Now that's big on award-winning quality and always Lidl on price. Subject to availability, selected stores excludes an eye.
You're in leakage, you're in leak.
Tenna Men. Pants and pads. Buy online or in shops. Tenna Men. Keep control.
Play along with our 10-second teaser. Ready? What is the only number not represented in Roman numerals? The answer is 0. If you got that right, you must be pretty smart. So you'll know who to choose for your business accounting, audit and tax affairs. Search Barnes Rofe. Clever accountants for business.
I'll give you 20p for it. 50p? £5.
Isn't it great when you get more for something than you expected? Scrap or part exchange with Vauxhall and we'll give you a guaranteed £4,000 towards a new Crossland-X or Grandland-X with 4.9% APR representative. Search Vauxhall Trade It. T's and C's and restrictions apply. Trade-in car must be registered in your name for at least 90 days. Available on conditional sale and personal contract purchase only. Subject to status 18+. Vauxhall Finance. Other deposit contributions may be available if you don't have a trade-in vehicle.
What is back and lay betting? Backing is a traditional bet, like betting that the action hero will save the day. But on the Betfair exchange, you can lay a bet, which is betting on the same thing not happening and taking money from those who think it won't. Why not give it a try? The Betfair Exchange.
T's and C's apply. Exchange basic package customers pay 2% commission. Other charges may apply. 18+. BeGambleAware.org.
Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
11:47. More from our panel. Elliot, Colburn, Daisy Cooper, David Simmonds, James Murray. What do they all have in common? They're new MPs elected for the first time on Thursday. Jackie is in Shipton on Stour. Hello, Jackie.
Hello.
Hi, what would you like to ask?
Yeah, I'm very interested in the result of this election. My question to the new MPs is this. Given that there will be a lot of people in the traditional Labour constituencies who have elected a Tory MP because their desire to leave the EU wasn't seen to be honoured by the Labour Party, they will also be people on universal credit, WASPy women, homelessness, etc. Does the panel think that these new constituencies can be held on to just on the Brexit issue, or do you think that the Tory party may now try to curb the excesses of universal credit and poverty in general in order to hold on to those seats once that Brexit is done?
Really good question there. I mean, universal credit is something where all the parties seem to agree, well, in theory it's a good thing, but the application of it has been, for many people, an absolute disaster. David, what are you going to be lobbying Therese Coffey, the DWP Secretary of State, to do about universal credit?
I think you're bang on about it. It's something which is very good in principle, and certainly the feedback that we get from a lot of the people who are on universal credit is that it's a lot better than the systems that were there before. But there are a number of things about it, including the impact of the waiting time, the impact of the arrangements for paying rent to landlords that are creating particular pressure points. So we know that there need to be some changes around that, and I'd like to see that happen. Poverty is a very complex issue. The best thing that we can do is to carry on the work that we've been doing as a government in the last 9 years of getting more people into work. Huge growth in the number of people. And admittedly, some of those people are in low-paid jobs, but you'll see in the manifesto a lot of the plans, both about taxation, about the way we want to see the economy develop, is designed to make sure people keep more of what they earn and find it easier to access work. And I think that's a crucial part of solving and tackling poverty in this country.
Daisy.
I've seen absolutely no evidence whatsoever that this Conservative government has any interest in tackling poverty, homelessness, or anybody who's suffering these kind of injustices. You know, universal credit was rolled out. It could have been stopped. It could have been reformed. The government's done nothing to do that. There was a UN Special Rapporteur who said that, 20% of our British population are now living in poverty, and it identified one actor that was turning a blind eye, and that was the Conservative government. We know from the government's own analysis that every single form of Brexit will leave the country poorer, which means there will be less money overall and therefore less money to help those who are at the bottom of the ladder. So I'm really, really concerned. And, do the Conservatives, will they address this? I've seen absolutely no evidence whatsoever that they have any intention of addressing it.
We had such a lovely consensus up to now, didn't we? James?
I have to say, I agree with a lot of what Daisy just said. I mean, I think the Tories, they are not going to change their policies. They're not going to suddenly become the party who wants to tackle inequality. I'm worried about the NHS. I'm worried about what the impact is going to be on, Ealing Hospital and the services in the local area that I represent. I'm worried about what our country's going to look like in 5 years after this government. So I think there's going to be, a lot of reflection about what happens when we have this government who has this majority. Brexit's one thing, but actually all of the other policies which they're going to be promoting over the next 5 years, I think are going to really impact on communities like the one I represent.
Okay. Elliot?
Yeah, I mean, I don't agree with Daisy and James on that. I do think that the government has recognised that there were problems with universal credit when it was first rolled out, and I think are now working to address those. I think another benefit that I would like to see the DWP take a look at is the high number of PIP applications that go to appeal and are successful. There's something clearly wrong there. I would like to see that also be looked at. A friend of mine who lives in Birmingham has had real problems with it. She has fibromyalgia, and I've seen how difficult it's been for her, so I'd really like them to take a look at that, and I think that the government are listening on this issue. But to answer Jackie's specific question about can we hold on to them just on the Brexit issue, absolutely not. No, of course we can't. We need to show, and I think Boris has shown, a willingness to listen to these new voters that we've picked up in the north of England and places that have never elected a Conservative MP, and we have to demonstrate to them over the next 5 years that we are actually going to accent on the concerns that they raise with us.
Jackie, thank you for that. Let's go to Chris, who's in Brighton. Chris, your question, please.
Yeah, hi, Ian. Hi, panel. Congratulations to you all. My question is, well, starting from my background, I was a lifelong Labour voter until this election. I voted Conservative, and so paradoxically euphoric because of their defeat. Their wins. What are going to be the next steps of all of your individual parties? What's your main priorities?
James, let's come to you first.
Yeah, and I think, as I said, earlier on in this show, I think from my point of view, personally, it's me getting into what I'm doing in my constituency in Ely North. I've got a huge number of people to meet there, go around and see. I was just in a primary school on Friday, which is the first thing I did as an MP, and it was lovely to go and meet the kids and the parents and the teachers there.
But what about your national party? What direction should the party head in now?
Yeah, and I think if I came on here and I said I had the answer, I'd be lying. I think anyone who comes on any show this morning and says I know exactly what the answer is wrong. I think we have to reflect on it, and I think we've had those few conversations.
How long can you afford to reflect on it? Because there are important elections in May next year. Obviously, you need to get a new leader elected as soon as possible. I would have thought. How long should this period last?
Yeah, well, I'm not setting the timetable for the leadership election and so on, but we need to have that balance between having a bit of time to reflect and think about what happened, but also get on with challenging the Tories, who are going to steam ahead with their policies, which, as I said earlier, are going to hit a lot of people who I represent and across the country. So we've got to get that balance right about making sure we've got time to reflect on what happened, but we're fighting back against the Tories in power.
David?
There's going to be a Queen's speech on Thursday. It's very clear from the election result and the debate that happened before the election that the voters expect a decision on Brexit in order that the country can begin to move on. I'm very proud of the fact that since the last Labour government, we've got 1.4 million people in work in this country. We can see the benefit that that's bringing in terms of both their access to housing, quality of life, mental health issues. In our manifesto, there's a whole load more policies that are designed to build on that. There's policies that are designed to address the shortcomings that we recognise in the education system, the NHS, my local hospitals. The ones I take my children to are falling to bits. They need replacing. And that's something, again, that we've committed to clearly. So what I want to see is a swift decision about that Queen's speech on Thursday so we can get on with the work of planning how we make those clear, practical differences that people will see in their daily lives so that the seats that we need to hold on to at that next election, who may have trusted us this time because of Brexit, vote Conservative next time because they recognise the positive change we can bring.
Daisy?
Well, this Conservative government, I think, is a huge threat to the country. And so we will not focus on too much introspection. Liberal Democrats will get to work this week on scrutinising the government. I hope that on some of the really important pressing issues like the climate emergency and social care, we can lead the way in actually building a cross-party consensus on how we develop these issues and address them urgently and come solutions for the long term. On Brexit, we need to scrutinise everything that the government does. I think a number of promises have been made. We're not going to get Brexit done in a few weeks' time. We've got years to come of negotiating free trade agreements and such like. And I do think it's really important that Liberal Democrats defend our parliamentary democracy itself. The Conservative manifesto sets out a massive power grab, potentially reforming the relationship between court and parliament. And we need to make sure that with the threat of potential Russian interference and with the threat from the Conservative government to change the potentially threaten the independence of our judiciary, we need to make sure that we defend our democracy from this potential power grab.
Elliot?
Well, I agree with a lot of what David said. I think the election was a clear sign that we do need to move on with Brexit. I think that has to be priority number one. And Daisy is right to a certain extent that this is only the beginning of the road, and isn't it great that we've got a majority so we can stop talking about whether we're leaving and actually get on with how. I think that is what people are really concerned about, but obviously we need to build on the stuff that was in our manifesto as well, particularly around the climate emergency, but around social care, which I agree with, but also things such as hospitals and our infrastructure.
Have any of you had your inductions yet? Because I gather there were some yesterday and some today. Daisy, you're nodding. You have. What does this involve when you go into the House of Commons for the first time? What do they do?
Well, it's a pretty slick operation, actually. You turn up at Paul Cullis' house, you go upstairs, you are given a buddy, so there's a sort of first come, first serve arrangement. So you're given a buddy takes you round. First thing you do is get your pass. They've got quite a nice little gimmick where they show you how to log in and to use your security pass, and a little door opens and you're given a suite, depending on the colour of your party, which is a silly gimmick but quite fun. Okay. Then they get you to get set up with your email address and all that kind of stuff, and then you talk to IPSA about budgets and expenses and all how that stuff works. Then security, you get a briefing on how security works for MPs as well. And then because I went yesterday, a couple of days earlier than the Monday start, I managed to get a little bit of a tour of the House of Commons as well, with pointers about where you go and where you walk and all that kind of business. So it's quite a thorough induction. And
but
the
you
one
don't
thing,
get an office yet.
No, don't get an office for several weeks. But the one thing I would say was that we were told very early on. In fact, on Friday morning, we were had an email from the House of Commons Services saying if you complete the form on Monday with your salary details, you'll get paid on the last day of December. And the first thing that occurred to me was, well, that's pretty efficient because that's within 2 weeks, and that's 3 weeks faster than anybody applying for universal credit.
Well, there you go. Lessons can be learned. Quick final text from Jenny in Walthamstow. Who is your political hero and who would you most like to go to dinner with? We're running out of time, so very quick answers, James.
Can you come back to me on that, actually? Who's my political hero? Who would I most like to go to dinner with? That's a really tricky one. Who would I like to go to dinner with? Come back to me on that.
Honestly, you've got to be a bit snappier than that, David.
I should have thought about that.
I'm a fan of Margaret Thatcher. She was the Prime Minister of my childhood, and I like the fact that she had policies which made a real difference to the lives of ordinary working people. And I want to see similar approaches from the new Conservative government.
And who would you like to go to dinner with?
I'd be delighted to have dinner with her. I only met her once briefly towards the end of her life. Who would I like to have dinner with today? It'd be very interesting to sit down with David Cameron and reflect on the things he did to change the Conservative Party.
Chamber, don't you, Elliot?
I'd actually like to go to dinner with Theresa May. I
was hoping for more original answers than this.
But
it's all on you, Daisy.
In terms of my political hero, I think everyone would like me to say Margaret Thatcher from the Conservative benches, but I think one of the early political activists that I ever became aware of was a lady called Benazir Bhutto in Pakistan.
All right. Daisy.
My political hero is my grandma, because she used to do the real kind of grassroots stuff for the Liberal Party in deepest Suffolk, selling little sandwiches to revellers in the early hours of the morning to raise money for the Liberal Club. And who would I like to go to dinner with? Probably my husband, because I haven't seen much of him for the last 6 weeks.
James.
I'm going to say it's not just copying Daisy. I was going to say my mum, actually, because because my mum. Okay, my mum was a counsellor in Ealing, and if she's listening to this, I'm sure this will embarrass her. But she's been a great inspiration to me.
Well, thank you all very much for joining us here on LBC. We will have you back on a future Cross Question, I'm sure. I'll be back tomorrow evening from 7. Coming up at 3, it's Ian Payne. But next on LBC, Majid Nawaz.
Coming up, senior Labour figures are plotting to end Jeremy Corbyn's left-wing stranglehold on the party by flooding it with 100,000 new members to elect a moderate new leader. Will this work? What should the Labour Party become? And who should be the next Labour leader? But first, speaking from Tony Blair's former seat, Boris Johnson quoted him, promising to serve the people. He's drawn up plans to run a, quote, revolutionary government that will see ministers sacked, Whitehall departments abolished, and civil servants replaced by external experts in a bid